All right, I've got the thumbs up that we are live, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Dr. Kelly Rivers. I'd like to welcome you to the second day of the 8th annual Bard Blount. I will be presenting and discussing an analysis of one of Shakespeare's perhaps most famous speeches. That is the Band of Brothers, or the St. Crispin's Day speech. Okay, so picture this. The date is October 25th, 1415. The place is Agincourt, France, in northern France. The time is dawn. Two armies face off. They are awaiting battle. The weather has been unpleasant for the last several days, rendering the ground muddy and full of holes and trenches. The ground is uneven and very treacherous. Two army camps are positioned among the trees, the French to the east, the English to the west. The battle would eventually take place between the copses of trees. The French army numbered between 13,000 and 15,000 men. They were led by Constable Charles d'Alva, not the French king who was known for psychosis. On the English side, there were 6,000 to 8,000 men, led by King Henry V and his fellow nobles. The English were outnumbered at least 2-1. Some historians and one of the characters in the play argues that it's closer to 5-1. A battlefield tradition of the English and other Catholic countries was for all of the men to make confession before a battle. With every military company traveled a priest, at least one priest, and several friars. However, Henry feared that the French would overhear his men making confession, so he ordered his troops the night before to spend the night in silence so that they would not be caught. As dawn approached, the English troops began to notice the swelling numbers of the French, and unease began to ripple amongst the troops. Henry's kin and fellow noble, the Earl of Westmoreland, bemoans the low number of English troops, saying, "Oh, that we now had here but 1/10,000 of those men in England that do no work today." Here he is saying, "Oh, would we have more troops? We are outnumbered." All of those men who decided not to join our army, only if we had 1/10,000 among them would we be victorious. Henry enters at this point in the play and chastises his kinsmen. And he says, "What's he that wishes so? My cousin Westmoreland? No, my fair cousin, if we are marked to die, we are enough to do our country loss. And if to live, the fewer men, the greater share of honor." So from the beginning of this speech, Henry acknowledges the low number. He realizes his men are outnumbered, but he says this is going to work to their advantage because their numbers are big enough that they will be missed by folks back home if they lose, and perhaps people will rally in their memory, but they are also not enough so that people will forget who they are as individuals. This speech is meant to reassure, inspire, and unify the English troops. It is an expression of national pride, solidarity, courage in the face of terrifying odds. And this notion about being the chosen few drives much of the speech's power. So we are enough to do our country loss. The idea of being part of a noble cause, or even playing from the underdog position, evokes in audiences a sense of community, belonging, and shared emotion. As the speech progresses, Henry claims that he doesn't care for the wealth or the outward appearances of his troops. Here he says, I am not covetous for gold, nor care I who doth feed upon my cost. It yearns me not if my men wear garments, such outward things do not dwell in my desires. He doesn't care that his troops do not have the fancy shiny armor that the French do, or the large number of horses and gaudy, elaborate costumes. For him, he says, if it be a sin to covet honor, then I am the most offending soul alive. For here, he only wants honor. Honor for God, honor for country, and honor for his fellow man. He only wants to share that honor with those who choose to fight with him that day, and no one else. For those who fight with him have chosen to do so, and that is a choice that he finds honorable. Henry calls on his men and he gives them a choice. He says, you can leave, you can choose to go and give in to the fear. He'll even pay them. He says, he which hath no stomach to this fight, let him depart. His passport shall be made and crowns for convoy put into his purse. Right? We will pay him. We will make sure he has safe passage home. But we would not die in that man's company that fears his fellowship to die with us. He says, we do not want to fight with someone who is not willing to fight with us. Anyone who is not willing to fight and die with a particular group would be unhonorable. The speech picks up pace here, and he acknowledges the particular day. It happens to be October 25th, which is the feast day of St. Crispin and St. Crispian. These are patron saints of shoemakers, and they were martyred. They were Catholic martyrs. So the English church was Catholic at this point, hadn't gone through the Reformation yet, and so this was an important feast day for them. And so Henry calls upon this day by allowing audiences this chance to position the text within a historical context. It is a specific moment in time, but it is also a specific holy moment. It's a holy day, not just a holiday, but a holy day. And these holy days were ways to mark the significance of events. And he says this battle will be no different. He identifies the day and uses it as a rallying cry, a day for remembrance and unity, especially for those who will live and survive this battle. He says, he that outlives this day and comes safe home will stand on tiptoe when this day is named and rouse him at the name of Crispian. So anytime a veteran hears this day, they will have a swell of pride and rise up among their communities and show their scars and say, I was there. I was brave. I was a hero. And that day will he remember with whom he shared blood. And that would be Harry the King, Bedford and Exeter, Warwick and Talbot, Salisbury and Gloucester. These are nobles. So even if the lowest born soldier can say, I shed blood with the king and the nobles on this day. Henry continues his speech and wraps it up by saying that what they do during this battle is crucial. It will be told in story and lore for generations to come, but only those who live it can truly claim the glory that comes with serving. And those who stay and fight, regardless of their social class and rank, will be considered brothers to the king. Now, if you think about how kings and their servants and their subjects, rather, function in terms of social class. This is someone incredibly wealthy coming down off their high horse and joining the common ranks. And he's telling these men, if you shed your blood with me, you are now family. All social class and rankings and hierarchies and all of that social nonsense goes out the window. What matters is that you shed blood with me, you fight with me, for me, and I will do the same for you. This honor of fighting with the king, and as the king says that he has the honor of fighting with the men, he says, will create a family, a band of brothers. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers, for he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother. Be he ne'er so vile, vile meaning low class, crude, lacking in manners. This day shall gentle his condition. By serving, it will raise him in the esteem and the estimation of society, and more importantly, the eyes of the king. And the gentlemen in England now abed, so those cowards who would not come and fight for their country and their king shall think themselves accursed. They will regret their decision to be weak and cowardly and hold their manhoods cheap when any speaks that fought with us upon St. Crispin's Day. Here he is, he's insulting the manhood, an absolute dig at the confidence and identities of those men who choose not to fight with the king. Perhaps do a historical reading of this text and you dive a little bit deeper, you can see that Henry's army was a volunteer army. And a lot of people served because it was a way of earning money for their families, but also it was a way of earning nobility, earning credibility within society, overcoming their circumstances. We have time.
Killing some time. Why not listen to the Project Preparing audiobook on Audible? It's an epic piece of sci-fi. If you love the audiobook, good news. The movie is an ignorant story by Ryan Gosling. Check them both out. I'll be here.
Fighting men. They have fought 300,000. That's 5 to 1. Besides, they're all fresh. It's a fearful odds. Oh, but we now had here. But 1/10,000 of those men in England that do no work today.
What's he that wishes so? My cousin Westmoreland? No, my fair cousin. If we are marked to die, we are enough to do our country loss. And if to live, the fewer men, the greater share of honor. God's will, I pray thee, wish not one man more. Brother, proclaim it, Westmoreland, through my host, that he which hath no stomach to this fight, let him depart. His passport shall be made, and crowns for convoy put into his purse. We would not die in that man's company that fears his fellowship to die with us. This day is called the Feast of Crispian. He that outlives this day and comes safe home will stand at tiptoe when this day is named, and arouse him at the name of Crispian. He that shall see this day and live old age will yearly on the vigil feast his neighbours and say, tomorrow is St. Crispin's. Then will he strip his sleeve and show his scars and say, these wounds I had on Crispin's day. Old men forget, yet all shall be forgot, but he'll remember with advantages what feats he did that day. Then shall our names, familiar in their mouths as household words, Harry the King, Bedford and Exeter, Warwick and Talbot, Salisbury and Gloucester, be in their flowing cups freshly remembered. This story shall a good man teach his son, and Crispian shall ne'er go by from this day to the ending of the world, but we in it shall be remembered. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers, for he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother. Be he ne'er so vile, this day shall gentle his condition. And gentlemen in England now abed shall think themselves accursed they were not here, and hold their manhoods cheap, while any speaks that fought with us upon St. Crispin's Day.
the music helps in that adaptation. And some of you might recognize that music. It was very similar to the music used in the film Independence Day, which totally ripped off this speech. But the success of this speech rests almost entirely with the emotional appeals. So if you think about audience appeals, ethos, logos, and pathos, ethos, we've got Harry the King, technical name Henry, but he refers to himself as Harry. He is making him a commoner. He is taking away his formal name and allowing people to recognize him and call him by a nickname, which again makes him part of this greater communion. But the most important logic, or the most prevalent appeal, is the emotional appeal. Here he is appealing to honor, national pride, manhood, courage, bravery. But one thing we need to remember as audiences is that Shakespeare wrote this, and there are two audiences to whom he's speaking. The direct one in the play, so he's directly addressing the troops to rally them in the morning of the battle. But he's also speaking to theater audiences of his own day. And this play was written and performed during the reign of Queen Elizabeth, who ushered in the golden age of England, the golden era, which is a time of national pride and unity and celebration of all things English. This speech and this play in particular were meant to solidify and perpetuate that celebration. So Shakespeare uses this speech to speak to his countrymen, both the fictional and the literal, and encourage pride. As the play was written 200 years after the battle, it also reminds audiences of England's victory over their dreaded enemy, the French. It also solidifies this belief in English superiority culturally, nationally, and politically. Now for us in 2026, we have the benefit of reflection and a less glamorous way of understanding the appeal of Henry's message here is that it expresses the reality of shared trauma bonding, something that might not be considered a positive experience. So trauma bonding, or shared trauma bonding rather, is the establishment of deep emotional connections based on similar experiences. Increases intense empathy, emotional validation, and psychological safety. Psychologists warn that while this sort of bond can result in profound understanding and provide comfort for some, it can also trap people in a dangerous psychological cycle. That if you don't break through and you keep reliving this trauma over and over, you'll never progress beyond it. But Henry's speech here, especially towards the end, encourages that sort of progress forward. Don't get stuck in the moment or dwell on this celebration. Spoiler alert, the English won the battle. They had fewer than 600 casualties, whereas the French lost upwards of 10,000. So this ultimate underdog story of being outnumbered 5-1 in some cases, they overcame the seemingly superior and more powerful French army and won the day. The less cynical and more rousing interpretation of the speech, one that is most often perpetuated and carries forth, appears quite often in military propaganda, as you can see on the images on the screen here. Especially the phrase, "we few, we happy few, we band of brothers." It remains very popular in military propaganda. And the idea of battle being a means of forging bonds of brotherhood still continues to persist. In fact, it is this idea of brotherhood, care of arms, esprit de corps, that many poets and today military recruiters still use as techniques. And they also feature this idea of brotherhood and camaraderie and the friendships and the survival tactics also feature among the most important characteristics that most veterans say they take away from their service. That is what they value the most. But even to us non-military folks who didn't serve, we can respond to the same feelings and notions that Shakespeare is trying to come across or to get across here. This notion of wanting to belong, to matter, to make a difference, to be special, to leave a mark on this world in a good way. So personal causes, social justice movements, calls for social, political, economic, and cultural reform echo Shakespeare's idea. Even here at Pellissippi State, the faculty and staff, we have a brotherhood or sisterhood of sorts. We come together for a united goal. We've dedicated our lives to promotion and application of education, to the sharing of ideas and the transferability of skills. But the ultimate takeaway from Shakespeare's St. Crispin's Day Band of Brothers speech is this: when facing unlikely odds, faith in oneself and one's companions means the difference between glory, success, and defeat. So bonds of kinship, not biological ones, but ones formed through social bonds, are forged in the fires of struggle. In the end, survivors are thrivers. Thank you.